I will say the war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon. It was perfect. I mean, it's perfect. It was the power we have, our military. We have the most powerful military anywhere in the world.
President Trump says the end is in sight, and now Iran is announcing the Strait of Hormuz is completely open for the remainder of the ceasefire, sending markets higher and oil much, much lower. Welcome back to the second hour of the Big Money Show. I'm Brian Brenberg, along with my magnificent co-hosts. And staying with us for the hour, Fox Business contributor, entrepreneur, occasional seller of used clothing, host of The Fixer, Marcus Lemonis. Thanks for staying with us, sir.
Got it, buddy.
All right, so how close are America and Iran to a lasting deal? So far, the U.S. brokered Israel-Lebanon ceasefire appears to be holding, but the president says the blockade of Iranian ports will remain in full force despite the strait opening. So, as Tehran's finances dry up and the regime runs out of options, it all comes down to negotiations.
Iran wants to make a deal, and we're dealing very nicely with them. We've got to have no nuclear weapons. If we do, that's a big factor. And they're willing to do things today that they weren't willing to do 2 months ago.
When will the next in-person
Probably,
meeting take
maybe
place?
over the weekend.
Will you send the vice president?
Maybe over there.
Will you send?
Marcus, you said something in the first hour that got my attention. You said, yeah, we got a big rally happening right now. I'm surprised it's not bigger. What is the market missing about what's happening with Iran that you think should be driving it higher?
Well, there's a lot of oversold stocks in the market today. And so we see, and Taylor and I talked about it in the break, retail is still very depressed. Leisure is still very depressed. And so I want to see those come back, and I'm not seeing them at the same rate. And so I'm a lot more excited about what's happening in the market than maybe even the market is, and I appreciate the 1,000 points. But there should be a lot of momentum, because when you take oil and you take that price down, it flows to everybody's corporate earnings for the next 6, 12, 18 months in a much bigger way than I think we're anticipating. So if you are sitting on the sideline with cash, I would tell you to deploy some right now.
David, you gave a very powerful pro-America first presentation in the first hour about this. You said, we don't need Europe, we don't need NATO. The president said we don't need Europe, we don't need NATO in the Strait of Hormuz. But over the long term, do you want to see the U.S. Navy have a presence in the Strait of Hormuz the way it does now? Do you want us to be permanently there, kind of assuring safe passage? Or do we need to see NATO? Do we need to see Europe there doing the job that is required for the energy they need from that part of the world?
It's time for them to step up. I mean, the fact that the president said we don't need you right now for doing the work that we're doing, I don't think he wants his plan to be cluttered by their business, because not only do they not have the wherewithal to come through the way we were hoping they would, but they also, I just think, would get in the way of what he is doing. However, long term, yes, I think we need that. And long term, I do think that the United States is going to play a role in, Jackie would speak to this better than I could because she's got family from there, but of really changing the system, of finding ways to change the system the same way the CIA was involved in changing Eastern Europe during the 80s. That's a long-term plan, though. That takes years, not just months. That really, I mean, Trump time speeds everything up, so maybe it'll take less time than it did to change the Soviet Union. But the thing that really gets me is all of these mainstream media sources and politicians and everybody in the establishment who said that Trump was going to fail miserably. Even some of our friends were saying that. Some of the people that work here were saying, and I mean, let's have them at least expose them as being fraudulent in what they gave to the American people as a real idea of what was happening. Because a lot of Americans, those who were not just the never-Trumpers, but a lot of Americans who were in the middle, the independents and everything, bought into that. Yeah. They thought this thing was never going to be fixed, that Trump was making it worse, not better. I'm hoping that this is going to be a huge wake-up call for them to stay on Fox, and there are some few sources on the internet as well that will give you the real story, but stay away from those people who got this story so wrong. Folks, stay away from them. They're no good. They're giving you a bill of goods, and it's not a good bill. They're literally giving you the bill and then walking away with your money.
And they have a track record of being wrong.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
look back at that, too. I want to make a couple of points here, Brian, if you don't mind.
You bet.
Just on the side of what happens next with the regime, David, yes, I'm very passionate about this issue. And, you know, I wonder if there's still more to come with respect to de-escalating and finishing this conflict that leads you know, some sort of ramp for the people to take their government back. That is ultimately what I would hope for. I'm not necessarily sure it's where the administration is going. They seem to have confidence in the new leadership in Iran. They've called them the new regime. I don't personally in that aspect of this. So we'll wait and see. But I also know that when Trump promises something, he usually follows through. He did promise the Iranian people that they would have their opportunity. So we'll see where we go from there. Something I talked about as risk in the first block, and I just want to clarify it, explain it maybe a little bit better, is still what happens with the uranium. The latest conversation is the president is saying the nuclear dust. That is defined by him as the uranium enriched to 60%. That is just one step away, and it's a quick step to get there to 90% to make a nuclear weapon. However, my understanding from some of the research I have done, this is not, that's the most dangerous part of it, but it might not necessarily be all the uranium that the country has. They might have 20% enriched uranium. They might have the materials to start the process all over again. And I know that this would slow them down, but for me, a real full win is knowing that you got all of their uranium in any capacity to be able to work on weapons again, and you've got a new regime in place, a real new regime that isn't going to try to reconstruct all of this to some certain degree. And so, you know, I think the president has done an amazing job. I don't think this is necessarily over yet. I look forward to seeing what the next steps are.
Yeah.
There's one piece that I think we haven't talked about enough. And if you look at all the moves that we've made here in North America and with Venezuela to really become a true energy provider, I think people are going to learn their lesson from this Iranian situation and not like the vulnerability and start to move their business to other places on a regular basis. And so I think America has a chance to be an energy seller and really create a lot of revenue. And I think the Venezuela piece happening before Iran wasn't accidental.
Taylor.
Let's talk about the markets a little bit, because I think I agree with Marcus. This was interesting. Back in January, 68% of stocks on the NYSE were trading above the 200-day moving average. Yesterday, that was only at 57. So you have record highs, but fewer stocks are trading above the 200-day moving average. January was record highs. You had more stocks trading above. So effectively, this is less breadth. There isn't as much of that broader participation. So does that mean that there's room for other stocks to come in and expand that participation? Is that concerning because this is led by only, half the stocks? I think something to watch, and that will be good about. One interesting note that I read this morning is this correction, and we talked about this on that chart, given how V-shaped it has been, shows that this is not a correction or a bear market, but a recovery. So here's a note. Corrections can involve a retest of the lows, but we would review any retest as a buying opportunity. So again, what we saw wasn't a V-shape back into a bear market, but a recovery to beget new highs. Just a couple analyses that I'm reading out there. Finally, Brian, on some of the fundamentals, very, very early days. We've only heard from 44 companies within the S&P 500. We're going to get a lot more in the next 2 weeks. But of those 44 out of the 500-ish, sales growth is up almost 13% year over year, and earnings growth is up 30% year over year. Now, those numbers inevitably will come down the broader that we get, but these are really good numbers when we're looking at fundamentals. You're giving me that skeptical look.
I'm listening. I'm learning right now.
You think, and Marcus can disagree with me, revenue usually grows if you're a good company like Walmart or Target in line with GDP. Like you're good if you're getting a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5% revenue. If you're coming in and you're telling me that revenue is up 12.5%, that looks good. Now, is that because of higher prices? Maybe. But either way, these companies, the fundamentals
He's
of
giving
these
you, I'm not giving you a look, but he is giving you a look.
No, I'm in agreement with her because if you're talking about low teens growth on the sales side, but then you're talking about triple that on the bottom line side, I would buy off on it if I'm in agreement with you, but I would buy off on there being like a little hidden gem there if the earnings weren't growing at the same time. Some of the earnings are from maybe a little layoff, some of the earnings for people getting more efficient, but there must be expansion somewhere in the profit stack on the margin side. And that really is what's driving, and that's the thing that people need to be excited about, very excited about, because people haven't felt great.
You know,
they should.
But the thing on inflation that should be mentioned, there hasn't been that spillover of inflation that we've been hearing so much about. And even the Fed, I rarely give the Fed any credit, but the Fed was saying that you have to look through this oil spike because it is not showing up in the core rate. Obviously, the inflation is bad if you're filling up at the pump, but it did not have that spillover effect in other parts of the area of what we buy. So this is going to be a quick recovery, I think, very quick recovery.
It is crazy over the last year and a half how much politics have driven wacky reactions in the market and people losing their minds because they hate Donald Trump and then losing their money as a result.
100%.
It is absolutely crazy, and it looks like it might have just happened again.